All right, guys. Today I'm going to talk about qualitative research. I think there was a lot of discussion online this week, and I'll try and summarize it. But some of the issues that I want to talk about in this presentation today, I think, are going to bring up that you guys have already brought up in terms of reliability and validity of qualitative research. Here we go. So, what is qualitative research? So the qualitative research is the collection, analysis, and interpretation of narrative data. And the purpose of qualitative research is to gain insight into a particular situation, a particular phenomena of interest. It's beneficial for describing and answering questions. If you have questions about a particular context or participants, for example, my research question could be how does a school district decide to implement smart boards in their classrooms? So, to do this research, I might go and start observing or even sitting on the board meetings to see the process that they go through. And that's a qualitative research question. Of course, the same research question could be quantitative as well if I want to give a survey. But sometimes it's a good idea to start with qualitative research because I don't know what type of issues come up when a school district wants to incorporate smart boards. So I need to sit on the meetings and see what type of issues come up, and then from that qualitative data, I can come up with a survey. And that's a mixed method study, and we'll talk about mixed method later on in the semester. But that gives you an idea of how qualitative research can actually lead to quantitative research. The purpose of qualitative research is to provide a deep and holistic understanding of a particular phenomena. Example that I just gave. It provides insight into the complexity of the various things that happen, common occurrences. So, why do kids struggle to learn mathematics? Right. So that could be a qualitative question where I observe when kids are learning mathematics in a classroom. And it also helps provide specific and concrete details to guide understanding in that particular setting or whatever setting that I'm trying to do research in. Um, it provides insight into the local meanings that activities and practices have for participants. So when I say local meaning, I might be interested in one particular school district and how they implemented smart boards. Right? Whereas that might be very different than the same research question being investigated at in Lafayette, as opposed to inner city school in Chicago, right? So I'm looking at the local meanings, and it'll also help a comparative understanding of phenomena if I do that research in Chicago and if I do that research in Lafayette. The same research question about, the smart boards, right? So both participants have different meaning to incorporating technology in the classroom. There are six general steps in qualitative research, which are very similar to quantitative research that been talking about so far. So you identify the research topic, reviewing the literature, selecting the participants, collecting data, analyzing data, and reporting the results. The main difference is in qualitative research, the review the literature part and sort of the methods evolve as you sometimes evolve as you collect data. Whereas in quantitative research, you already have set what methods and what instruments you're going to use. Whereas in qualitative, they can evolve. So, for example, if I am looking at how um, if I'm collecting data in qualitative research and I observe a classroom, and initially I had only planned to observe the classroom, but something happened in the classroom that I decide, well, maybe I should interview the teacher, so I can add the interview. Whereas quantitative research, you don't add, instruments like that. There are various types of research, qualitative approaches. So case study is one type of qualitative research where the effort is to understand a single person or entity. Um, so my research question could be, what are the characteristics of that particular entity or phenomena or person or setting? Another type of qualitative research is ethnography. So it's an effort to describe and analyze all or part of the culture of a community by identifying and describing what practices and beliefs do participants have. So my research question could be, what are the cultural patterns and perspectives of this group in its natural setting? Couple other types of qualitative research. Again, this is not very exhaustive. Some common qualitative approaches that come to mind. One is phenomenology, which is an effort to understand the meaning that individuals give to an experience. So, what is the experience of an activity or concept from the participant's perspective? So, what meaning do they attribute to that activity? Action research could also be considered qualitative, whereas it's an effort to seek a solution or improvement to a practical problem. So a lot of times teachers do action research. So a teacher might be interested in how do I improve my practice of science instruction by using technology. So she might actually do an action research project. Of course, there are other types of qualitative research as well, historical research where you evaluate existing documents and stuff like that. So the main difference between all the qualitative approaches is they're in different social context. Are you looking, for example, in phenomenology, we're looking at what meaning do individuals give, as opposed to in ethnography, we're looking at a culture, right? So, and you select the participants based on your research question and different reasons. That's the main difference between the various qualitative approaches. Uh, there are eight main features of qualitative research. One main is researchers immerse themselves in the situation, whether it be through interview, where you interact with the participant. If you're observing culture, you go and live in that culture. And the data, it reflects participants' perspectives. You put a lens through which you analyze data. But at the end of the day, when data is analyzed, you're providing participants' perspectives and not your own biases coming to play. And this was a discussion online throughout. People said, while qualitative research is not reliable because researchers' lens comes into play. Yes, but qualitative research is as reliable as quantitative research. So to say that qualitative research is not reliable, um, is wrong. Qualitative research is very powerful. It gives, as I said, insight into local meanings, insight that participants have that cannot be gathered to just quantitative research. Um, and qualitative research is reliable. So you establish procedures where you make sure qualitative research that you're doing is reliable and produces valid results. So, for example, what I could do is, say, if I am doing an interview study and I interview 30 participants, and as a researcher, I start coding the data. What I might do to establish reliability is have somebody else who's not part of the research look at, say, one third of the transcripts of the interview, and they also code and see is the second rater a person seeing the same patterns and themes that I'm seeing, and then you match what's the percentage of agreement, right? And typically it should be 80% or higher, and that means the other person is also seeing similar patterns and themes and observing the same thing in the data as you as a researcher are. So hence your data is reliable, right? I'll give you that qualitative researchers are not interested in generalizability because you're only doing study in one particular context, and also you're not really doing any statistical analysis for generalizability, right? So I think qualitative research is powerful, it's valid, it's reliable, and to say that it's not is a wrong misconception. Um, so moving on, again in qualitative research, the data you collect data as they occur in the real world situation, the natural context, and data is typically narrative in nature, interviews, observation notes, field notes, and you interact with the participants, whether it be an interview or you go to that setting. Some other features, um, as a researcher in qualitative research, you avoid early decisions or assumptions about what you can observe in the data, and you let the data speak to you. So when you analyze the data and code the data, you observe you make patterns and themes based on what emerges from the data, rather than going in. This is what I expect to find. Um, and you analyze the data inductively. So you look for patterns, relationships, or common themes amongst, say, if I had interviewed 30 teachers or 30 participants. So, right, so I'm looking for what common themes and patterns that emerge from. The methods in qualitative research provide clear, detailed information that reflect participants' voices. So if you have a theme, say, when the teachers are implementing Smartboard, and I have a theme about challenges of using Smartboard. And there are various challenges. Say training is one of the challenges because they don't have a background. I might use actual quotes from the teachers and include in the manuscript, okay, to highlight what I mean by challenges in training of using Smartboard. And as a researcher, I also report my own role and my own biases. And I'll talk about ethical um, issues in qualitative research in a second here. Excuse me. So, the couple of technical issues: validity and reliability. So, validity is the degree to which the qualitative data collected accurately gauges what is being measured. Okay, there are two components to validity: trustworthiness of the research and understanding of the research. Trustworthiness of the research, how trustworthy it is, can be established by addressing um, credibility. So take into account all the complexities in the study, and explain if there are any other um, issues that come up that might not be easily explained based on the data that you've collected. So what are alternate explanations about things that you're observing? Mm, transferability. So if somebody reads your research study, they should be able to tell anybody else what context this study was conducted in and what was the setting. So provide as much detail as possible to the reader about the setting, about your participants, so they can see if your findings transfer to their situation. Clearly, findings from Lafayette are not gonna, Indiana are not gonna transfer to Chicago, right? But from Lafayette, Indiana, they might be able to transfer to, say, Lansing, Michigan, right? Similar towns. So it's important to provide that context. Dependability. So it's important to collect reliable and stable data, um, and not letting your own judgments and biases coming into play. So, for example, if you're conducting an interview study, you cannot your questions should be unbiased and should not tell the participants that you have a prejudice against a particular thing, right? So they should be neutral. And also, when you look at the data, analyze the data, it should be able to be confirmed. So you are objective and you neutral when you analyze the data. Um, and as I said about, you can use interreliability is one way to that. If somebody else looks at the same data, they'll find similar patterns. Validity, I mean, it's also understanding the research. So there's descriptive validity, which is the factual accuracy of the account. So as a researcher, you're not distorting or making anything up that they hear or see, that you're only reporting stuff that you see or you have observed or you have data to back up. Interpretive validity is that the meaning that you've attributed to the participants' behaviors or words, right? So you want to make sure that you accurately make sense of what participants are saying or how participants are acting. One way to do it is, clearly doing interreliability that I just said, but you could also go back to participants and say, hey, when I interviewed you, you suggested these things. Is this what you meant? So that's called member check. You're going back to the participants. Um, Evaluative validity, of course, that you are objective when you report data, that you're not having your own preconceived judgments, biases, or evaluations come into play. So I think these are some very, very important things when you think about qualitative research. You want to make sure it's trustworthy and you want to make sure it's valid. Um, okay?